A very good morning to one and all present here. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to the inaugural session of this two-day national seminar conference on reframing the subaltern narratives, comparative and interdisciplinary insights, organized by the Department of English in collaboration with the Center for Distance and Online Education, MANU. We are thrilled to have such a great gathering of minds where ideas, dialogues, and diverse perspectives come together to challenge, question, and bring to light the stories that often remain unheard. I am affirmative that your presence will add to this conference, and we will have 2 days of fruitful discussions, informative presentations, and significant interactions. May I now request everyone to kindly settle down as we begin the proceedings. To invoke the divine blessings for the success of this conference, we shall begin with the Qirat. I respectfully invite Mr. Muhammad Shafeen, MA English first year student, for the recitation.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم. مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. صدق الله العظيم. السلام عليكم.
Thank you, Shafin, for setting a serene and reflective tone for this session. We shall now listen to the university anthem that symbolizes the academic legacy and collective identity of our university. I request the technical team to kindly play the anthem.
یہ باب شہر علم ہے اردو زبان کا. یہ باب شہر علم ہے اردو زبان کا. آؤ سفر یہاں سے کرے آسمان کا. باب شہر علم ہے اردو زبان کا. علم و کمال فضل و شعر و شعور تک پھیلی ہے دل نواز مہک دور دور تک. ملتا یہاں نصاب ہے سارے جہان کا. یہ باب شہر علم ہے اردو زبان کا. یہ باب شہر علم ہے اردو زبان کا. ہر نقش و رنگ و بو سے کر اپنی گفتگو آزاد درسگاہ کی ہے یہ بھی جستجو، سب فاصلہ مٹاتے چلو درمیان کا، یہ باب شہر علم ہے اردو زبان کا، یہ باب شہر علم ہے اردو زبان کا۔ غرب و جنوب سے ہو کے شرق و شمال سے آگے بڑھو، خیال ملا دو خیال سے، چرچا ہو کائنات میں ہندوستان کا، یہ باب شہر علم ہے اردو زبان کا، یہ باب شہر علم ہے اردو زبان کا۔ فصل صدا بہار سے بستی بسی رہے، مل کر دعا کرو کہ یہ کھیتی ہری رہے، سایہ رہے سروں پہ کسی سائبان کا، یہ باب شہر علم ہے اردو زبان کا۔ آؤ سفر یہاں سے کرے آسمان کا، یہ باب شہر علم ہے اردو زبان کا، یہ باب شہر علم ہے اردو زبان کا۔
With the felicitation ceremony, I request our Vice Chancellor Sir, Professor Syed Ainul Hassan, to felicitate our preeminent chief guest, Professor N. Nagaraju. Sir, please. I now request our Registrar, Professor Ishtiaq Ahmed, to felicitate our esteemed keynote speaker, Professor Rajendra Chenni. I request Dr. Geeta to felicitate our respected guest of honor, Professor Vibha Sharma. I request our head, Professor K. Nagendra, to felicitate our Vice Chancellor Sir and Registrar Sir. To formally welcome the gathering and set the academic context of the conference, I now invite Professor K. Nagendra, the Head Department of English, Manu, to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you, Rahat. A very good morning to all. Honorable Vice Chancellor of Maulana Azad National Urdu University, Professor Syed Ainal Hassan, Honorable Vice Chancellor of the English and Foreign Languages University, Professor N. Nagaraj, respected Registrar, Manu, Professor Istiaq Ahmed, Guest of Honor, Professor Vibha Sharma, Department of English, Aligarh Muslim University, and distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Rajendra Chenni, Director, Manasa Center for Cultural Studies, Shivamogga, Karnataka. Professor Muhammad Razaullah Khan, Director, Center for Distance and Online Education, Manu, Hyderabad. Respected Dean, SLLI, and Professor Gulfishan Habib. Esteemed delegates, scholars, colleagues, research scholars, students, and distinguished guests. On behalf of the Department of English, Maulana Azad National Urdu University, it is my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to you all to the inaugural session of the two-day national conference on Reframing the Subaltern Narratives, Comparative and Interdisciplinary Insights. We are deeply honored by the august presence of our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Syed Ainal Hassan, whose visionary leadership continues to strengthen academic excellence and inclusivity at Manu. We are equally honored to welcome our chief guest, Professor N. Nagaraju, Honorable Vice Chancellor, EFLU, Hyderabad, a distinguished academician whose scholarship and leadership have significantly shaped English studies in India. We also extend a warm welcome to the guest of honor, Professor Vibha Sharma, a distinguished scholar whose academic contributions have enriched contemporary literary and cultural studies. I extend a special welcome to our keynote speaker, Professor Rajendra Chenni, whose work in cultural studies and regional literatures has played a vital role in shaping contemporary cultural discourse. I also place a record on sincere gratitude to Professor Istiaq Ahmed, Registrar Manu, for his continued support. We are delighted to have with us Professor Muhammad Razaullah Khan, Director, CDOE Manu, whose support and collaboration have contributed meaningfully to the organization of this academic event, and Professor Gulfishan Habib, Dean, SLLI, for her guidance and encouragement. This two-day national conference brings together scholars and researchers from across the country to engage in critical discussions and subaltern narratives through comparative and interdisciplinary perspectives. The conference seeks to re-examine marginalized voices, challenge dominant literary canons, and explore alternative frameworks of representation across languages, cultures, and disciplines. I take this opportunity to acknowledge the dedicated efforts of the organizing committee, faculty members, research scholars, and student volunteers whose commitment has made this academic event possible. We hope that the deliberations over the next 2 days will foster meaningful academic exchange, critical insights, and fruitful collaborations. I once again thank you. I warmly welcome you all and wish the conference every success. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, sir, for your kind and perceptive welcome. I now invite Dr. Geeta, Faculty, Department of English, and the conference convener to present the conference note.
Thank you, Rahat. Namaste and good morning to everyone. Respected dignitaries on the dais, our esteemed keynote speaker, plenary speakers, my respected teacher, guests, dear colleagues, participants, research scholars, and my dear students, a warm good morning to you all. At the very outset, I would like to recall the words of Antonio Gramsci, an Italian Marxist philosopher, who reminds us that the history of subaltern social groups is necessarily fragmented and episodic. This insight lies at the heart of our conference as it urges us to critically recover, reinterpret, and reframe those marginalized narratives that have long remained scattered, silenced, or unheard. It is indeed a great pleasure and honor to welcome you to the two-day national conference on Reframing the Subaltern Narratives, Comparative and Interdisciplinary Insights. We are deeply privileged by the gracious presence of our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Padma Shri, Professor Syed Anwar Hassan Sir, whose visionary leadership and unwavering commitment to inclusive and critical scholarship continue to guide and inspire the academic community of Manu. We are equally honored by the presence of our distinguished chief guest, Honorable Vice Chancellor EFLU, and my teacher, Professor Nagaraju Sir, and our distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Rajendra Channi Sir, and our guest of honor, Professor Ishtiaq Ahmed Sir, and Professor Vibha Sharma Ma'am, whose scholarly contributions enrich the spirit of this gathering. The theme of the conference highlights the term subaltern, popularized by Antonio Gramsci, refers to social groups that exist outside the structures of political representation and cultural dominance. These are communities historically marginalized due to caste, class, gender, ethnicity, and colonial histories. The concept was later expanded within post-colonial discourse by the Subaltern Studies group, including influential scholars such as Ranjit Guha, Gayatri Spivak, who challenged dominant historiography and questioned whether marginalized voices can truly be heard within hegemonic frameworks. Reframing subaltern narratives means moving beyond documentation toward reinterpretation. It encourages scholars to question who speaks, for whom, and under what conditions are certain voices amplified while others remain unheard. Such inquiry is particularly significant in societies like India, where caste hierarchies, tribal displacement, gender discrimination, and linguistic marginalization continue to shape social realities. In essence, reframing the subaltern narratives calls upon us to reconsider the foundations of knowledge itself. It reminds us that the margins are not peripheral, they are central to understanding the complexities of human experience. Through this collective effort, we reaffirm our commitment to scholarship that is inclusive, transformative, and responsive to the voices that history has too often overlooked. The hybrid mode of this conference reflects our shared commitment to inclusivity and accessibility, allowing scholars from diverse institutions and regions to come together on a common academic platform. Over the next 2 days, through keynote address, plenary sessions, panel discussions, and paper presentations, we hope to nurture thoughtful dialogue, critical reflection, and spirit of collaborative scholarly exchange. I take this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to the university for its constant support and encouragement. I also extend my heartfelt thanks to our invited guests, speakers, session chairs, resource persons, and contributors for generously sharing their time, expertise, and insights. My appreciation also goes to the organizing committee as well as my colleagues from the department, scholars, and volunteers whose collective efforts have made this conference possible. So once again, I warmly welcome you all and wish the conference every success. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for outlining the intellectual framework of this conference. With great honor, I now invite Professor Ishtiaq Ahmed, our university's registrar, to address the gathering.
Good morning to all of you. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Syed Anwar Hassan Sahib, our keynote speaker and eminent writer, Professor Rajendra Channi Sahib, our chief guest and the Vice Chancellor of IFLU, Professor N. Nagaraju Sir, our guest of honor, Professor Vibha Sharma from Department of English, Aligarh Muslim University. Director of this conference, Professor Nagendra Sahab, and Dean of the school, Professor Ulfisa Habib Sahiba. Director of CDOE, Professor Razaullah Khan, Professor Shagufta Shahin, and convener of this international conference, national conference, Dr. Geeta. Distinguished participants, scholars, and our dear colleagues, our faculty members. It's a great pleasure that Department of English is organizing two-day national conference on reframing the subaltern narratives, comparative and with comparative and interdisciplinary insights. The concept of subaltern narratives is important area of studies in English comparative literature and also forms a remarkable part of cultural studies. Scholars participating in this conference will certainly look into the historical, political, cultural disciplines, cultural discourses that is very much rooted in the colonial period, and that has been underlined in the concept note that has been circulated by the organizer of this national conference. It's truly a comparative and interdisciplinary, rather we can say it's a multidisciplinary conference, has provided a critical and academic platform to explore this subaltern literature with some new perspective. I do hope that a scholar will engage their research, their academic insights, and make this national conference meaningful. I also hope that publication of this national conference will go a long way in setting the tune of looking the subaltern narratives with some new perspective and with some new outlooks. Thank you very much. I extend my best wishes to the organizer of this national conference, the entire team of researchers, scholars, and students who had been working day and night to make this national conference successful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your erudite response. It is now time for the keynote address. Before we begin, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. Professor Rajendra Chenni is a distinguished literary critic, bilingual writer, and former professor of English at Kuvempu University. Currently, the director of Manasa Center for Cultural Studies, Shivamogga, he has authored 28 books in Kannada and English. His work spans cultural studies, literary theory, and contemporary politics with significant contributions to the study of Karnataka's history and literature. A recipient of numerous prestigious awards, including the Karnataka Rajyotsava Prashasti 2025, Professor Chenni is widely recognized as the scholar activist committed to social justice and cultural dialogue. With this, I would like to invite Sir.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, dignitaries on the dais, fellow teachers, researchers, and students. I feel very honored to be invited to participate in this conference by a university named after one of the greatest individuals in modern Indian history, the great Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. I was very fascinated by the biographical mentions made of the great Maulana, and it's really a great honor that this university has been named after him. One of the finest scholars of the age, a child prodigy who was editing internationally known journals at the age of 12 and 13, a great thinker and activist who laid the foundation of a newly being born nation on the secular foundations and also on the amity and friendship among the political citizens of this new entity which was being established at that time. The legacy of Maulana Azad, who was our first educational minister, and also the one who established the academies in India. I felt very happy reading in a biography that when the inauguration of the Sahitya Academy had to take place, he spoke to the Prime Minister Nehru, inviting him by saying, "Look, Jawahar, we are not inviting you because you are the Prime Minister of India. We are inviting you because you are a writer in English." I think all of us would look back with sentimental nostalgia at a time when somebody could speak to the Prime Minister in this friendly way. And Azad could do it because he was an involved and intensively involved participant, not only in the Indian Renaissance, but also in the struggle for freedom. I mentioned these, impressions of Azad because I have a feeling that what we are going to discuss in the two-day conference has much to do with some of the questions that Azad and Nehru and Gandhi and the intellectuals of that period raised. Because here was a great civilization subalternized by imperialism, and entering into this brief period of amnesia and forced to rediscover the resources which had sustained it for so many thousands of years. Therefore, as I'm going to argue in the keynote address, which I shall be giving after some time, this rediscovery of the cultural resources and the intellectual legacies was mainly focused on also the modern democratic principles of equality and freedom. This involved a tremendous transformation of the society that existed at that time, and also the retrieval of the histories in which so many communities were invisibilized. Their voices had been erased. Their presence was not acknowledged. Therefore, building a free society also meant addressing questions of subalternity, resistance, and equality. I hope this would be what we shall be discussing in the two-day proceedings. I'm also very happy that one of the departments here bears the name of Allama Iqbal, and while preparing for the keynote, I came across a wonderful poem by Allama Iqbal, which has a very interesting title, Lenin, Lenin, Khuda ki huzur mein. Lenin, the Marxist leader and the one who led the revolution in Russia, appears in the court of Allah, and he makes a plea to Allah, talking about how capitalism had destroyed humanity. And he talks about those who give us the talim, the education of equality, even while drinking the blood of the poor. They call it trade, but it is not trade, it is gambling. Almighty Allah, you are omnipotent, but you are too full of pity. Why don't you destroy these forces which are keeping people subalternized? Such are the legacies that we have, and I hope we'll have a very fruitful and intellectually rewarding discussion over some of those issues. I'll come back after the inauguration and continue my keynote address. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for that intellectually enriching address. We are pleased to have with us our guest of honor, Professor Vibha Sharma, professor at Aligarh Muslim University, a preeminent scholar whose work spans performance, translation, and post-colonial studies. Ma'am, it is a pleasure to welcome you. I now invite you to share your remarks with us.
जात न पूछो साधु की, पूछ लीजिए ज्ञान, मोल करो तलवार का, पड़ा रहन दो ज्ञान. This is a couplet by Kabir Das. The word jat is the key word here. Kabir Das is one of the moral compasses of India's soul, India's cultural soul. I dedicate whatever I'm speaking to people who are on the margins, and especially the poets and performers. Thank you very much for inviting me here, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Maulana Azad National Urdu University, Janab Professor Syed Ainul Hasan Sahab, the keynote speaker for today, Professor Rajendra Chenni, chief guest for today's event, Professor Nagaraju, registrar of this university, Professor Ishtiaq Ahmed, the conference coordinator, Dr. Geeta, the chairperson, the head of the department, Professor Nagend Kota Cheruvu, senior faculty members seated here, Professor Shagufta, Professor Habib, and Professor Razaullah, all the students of this department, this university, Assalamu alaikum, a very good morning, adab, namaste. You have heard my name. It just happened that I was present in the university campus, so I am barging in this inaugural session with the efforts of the person none other than your Vice Chancellor, sir. And I must thank him for this wonderful opportunity that he has lent me by allowing me to share my very little knowledge on this topic. I must speak a few disclaimers. You see that as a speaker in a conference on subalternity, I always feel uncomfortable. I always feel uncomfortable to talk about subalternity because of the very obvious reasons that I'm speaking from a vantage point. There are certain things that we must accept, that those who pass through it, those who face it, have the first right to speak about it. I happen to be one of the privileged communities of this country. And when I say that, you know the obvious things, they are there in my name. I can never do justice. People like me can never do justice. However fine and polished our language, however fine penetration we have in our critical thinking on the subject. It is always lesser than that so-called crude emotion, the so-called raw passion of protest, of pain that the people have been facing for ages in this country. It is always higher, more respectable, should be more worthy of our discussion. This should be a clarity in the mind of people who are doing researches on topics of subalternity, marginalization, Dalit literature, and similar such areas of studies in literature and culture. We must understand from what position we speak and what have we got as our experiences. This is an unlearning that is very important for any discussion of this sort. This unlearning should be the point of initiation into discussions on such topics. I'm sure, it may sound very harsh, it may sound very unpleasant, It may sound political, but there is nothing apolitical about this topic. It is absolutely not apolitical. Now, the second thing is, having said that, I must share that in my little efforts of last 15-20 years, I have been working on performance culture of India. And in this topic, I find that performance should be talked about. The word literature is a very modern word. Literature is not a classical paradigm. Literature is a post-printing press paradigm and discourse. This post-printing press paradigm and discourse cannot do justice to what was said, what was performed, what was sung, what was recited, what was danced to prior to the printing press era. The oral culture, the orature, the oral tradition, what about those narratives? I mince no words when I say that the entire performance industry of India, the modern cinema, the playback singing industry, the music industry, which is millions and billions of industry, it stands on the contribution of unsung, marginalized, totally brushed under the carpet people who were called as tawayafs. You dig out and you'll find that at the end of the tunnel, the story of a tawayaf is there. Do they ever get recognition in the narratives of the glossy pages of performance talks and gossips and cinema discussions? Can we ever put the tawayaf's contribution in the same line, same equation where we talk about T-Series as #1 YouTube channel in the world? Can they be placed in the same discussion? Absolutely no. We are 21st century people. You are actually Gen Z. You are born in 21st century. You have opened your eyes in a culture where click of a button is not a privilege. For you, it is more important to dig out the past and find out that just keep talking about literature written in pages. Will it ever do justice to people who never wrote literature, who were never speaking to write literature, who never ever held a pen in their hands? What about their songs? What about their pain? What about their devotional poetry? We refer to it as devotional poetry for the sake of acceptance. It is sheer poetry. It's music, it's rhythm, it's language, it's rhyme. It is not the literature that a Department of English Studies or the modern nomenclature often refers to. So when I say Jaat na poocho sadhu ki, pooch lijiye gyan, what does Kabir say here? Why is he so relevant? He's saying, don't ask my caste. Don't ask any sadhu's caste. We have relegated the sadhus, the singers, the musicians of the past to certain categories called Dalit performers, subaltern performers. Why are they not just performers? Why are they not just the mainstream first topic of our discussions? It is from them everything initiates in this South Asian subcontinent in the name of performance and culture. We have created the sacred and profane. We have created the classical and the massy for the sake of creating categorization, so that we say that, no, this categorization is only for the sake of academic purposes. It doesn't do anything wrong. Actually, it is politics. We need to dig deeper. Look at something very interesting. I worked on Nautanki and Swang. I met many female performers. I especially did a work on female performers in indigenous performance cultures of North India, and especially my region, that is Uttar Pradesh, where Nautanki and Swang are the popular indigenous performance traditions. The word Nautanki is not any art form. Nautanki was a famous Swang. It became so famous that it became the generic name. Nautanki means a princess who was only as light weighted as a Tanka. Tanka is a weight, unit of weight. She was feather weight. It became so popular that this particular genre now was called as Nautanki, like Xerox and photocopy. You know that. Gulab Bai is one of the doyens of Nautanki. Catherine Hansen has written a book on her. You can find out. It's always there in English departments. Gulab Bai. She tells in her story, I have met people similar to Gulab Bai. Of course, I could not meet her because it was not possible. She was too old when I started working, and then she passed away. So, women in these performance traditions are from not high caste. But men are allowed to be high caste. Or I should say, for men there is no restriction. Because to perform here is considered something not classy, not enough, not mainstreaming. So women of the not very high classes are the actors and actresses, whereas men of any class can be participating. Natharam Gaur, who's from Hathras, Hathras is a region near Aligarh. Hathras घराना भी स्वांग का नौटंकी का एक सेंटर रहा है. He was the doyen, and he has his surname God. You know who are God. So that explains a lot of things. That the marginalization of people who are coming from different castes and different sections of society has actually led to a lot of whitewashing and lot of erasure of the performance culture of India. That erasure is not difficult to be unturned. You can undo that erasure very easily. If you just start digging out the stories of Tawayafs, Sufi poets, devotional poets, and the castes that were involved in the troops of Swang, Nautanki, Jatra, and Terukutu, and all Bhavai, and Bhan Pathar in Kashmir. You will find so many things, the dynamics, the caste dynamics, the gender dynamics, and the literature that exists around those kind of performances. It's very important to find out about that. That I think is one of the important things that today's performance industry should be told about. Today morning I was looking at some videos. Many actresses and actors in today's film industry have their forefathers or mothers who were in the courtesan industry. They were singers in the courts, or they were attached to Tawayaf's profession. Thankfully they don't hide anything about it because they can't. They can't afford to hide. But don't you think it has a contribution? Third or fourth generation of their family members are calling the shots of cinema industry, which is biggest in the world. Should we not acknowledge the contribution of Jaddan Bai, Gulab Bai, and the singers who were there, Lata Mangeshkar's family? Do we ever explore about it? We don't want to explore about it because we will feel ashamed. They don't feel ashamed. We feel bad. No. We have created a kind of straight-jacketed performance person in our mind, a person who's the devotee of goddess Saraswati cannot be a person of courtesan culture. No, it's not true. All performers dedicate themselves to goddess Saraswati irrespective of their class, creed, gender, caste in this country. And goddess Saraswati extends her blessings to all of them. Why is it that we want to see with certain lenses? It is very important. Today, thankfully, we have lesser inhibitions. We are living in a world where we have more metaphors, more jargons to explain these processes. And we have more audience, more acceptance for talking about these things. You should not be scared of it. If you are writing a synopsis where you are working on somebody called these names, you know how to defend it. You should be empowered enough to defend it. That's what is required from the discussions and forums like these. Merely churning out printed materials one after the other and creating papers and PhDs is only going to do a very little of what is required. We need to generate a cultural movement of inclusivity, a cultural movement that is going to undo the appropriation that happened in the time of the colonial period and of course in the time post 1947 also. Yes, the colonial period was responsible. That draconian act in which tawayafs and courtesans were relegated as criminals, that is responsible for their subjugation. But that's not all. The story doesn't end here. The story actually began from there. In post-1947 era, what have we done to undo that? What about our classical traditions? Why do we differentiate between that? It is because of this, what happens in the forums like these, the intellectual spaces like these. It is because of the narratives that are set that people on the street suffer. The nut, have you seen the nut? Nut people, Nut is a community who perform gymnastics on the road, the street performers. Have you ever talked to them? What has happened to them? How do they suffer? What do they do when their profession is dwindling? And they do something absolutely fantastic without training, without safety gadgets. You need to, English departments need to extend their wings of narrative, intellectual, and other kinds of securities to the cultural spaces. Irrespective of the nomenclature that we have in these universities, Department of English, Department of Urdu, culture is our priority. Language is part of culture. Language exists as a component of culture. Culture is something that unites us. It is the soul, it is the identity. It is the mainstay of India's heart and identity. So I urge upon you to come forward from wherever you are. I'm sure you are from different parts of this country, and you go back and find out in your town, in your village, what performance traditions, what devotional poetry, what Sufi music, who Sufi saint was there, what kind of performance was there, how people sat, and why is it considered bad or good, and why something is preferred as compared to the other, why has something been diminished, why there is no support. If you ask these questions, you will yourself find the energy to explore the answers. You don't have to look towards governments for this energy. The energy lies within you. You just need to decide who you are. What is the role of an English scholar? We must look at Europe. In European countries, English scholars served one native language of Europe, at least one. Look at the poets, the writers, they're either writing about French, all English authors are either writing about French, German, Dutch, Portuguese, Latin, Greek. They are documenting it into English so that the world can read about it. Why can't we do it? It is the onus on the departments of English in the entire country to document about the culture of India, especially the marginalized culture of India. Bring the marginalized culture as the mainstream, write about them. That actually will be the perfect reframing of the subaltern narratives. We don't have to reframe the content of these narratives. We have to reframe the gaze with which the society has been looking at them, the gaze which literature has offered them. That's what is required. These are some Socratic questions that I'm offering you. You can agree or disagree with this. It's your choice, but at least give some time to think about this. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your insightful reflections. Before we proceed to the chief guest's remarks, it is now time to formally introduce our chief guest, Professor N. Nagaraju. He is a distinguished academician and an experienced university administrator. He is currently serving as the Vice Chancellor of the I'm so sorry. Yes. Okay, can I start again? Please pretend you didn't hear anything. Our chief guest, Professor N. Nagaraju, is a distinguished academician and an experienced university administrator. He currently serves as the Vice Chancellor at the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad, having assumed office in March 2025. With over 37 years of experience in teaching, research, and academic leadership, Professor Nagaraju has earlier served as the Vice Chancellor of Gangadhar Behar University, Odisha, and has held key academic and administrative positions at the institutions, such as Central University of Karnataka and Rajiv Gandhi Central University, Arunachal Pradesh. As an accomplished scholar of English, he has published widely, guided research scholars, and actively participated in national and international academic forums. Sir, your presence lends special meaning to this conference, and we are honored to have you here. I welcome you to the podium.
I am coming to the mic after those Socratic questions. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Manu, very Padma Shri, Hassan Saab. In fact, you all know that he has been doing good work, and we all know that, and his vision for the university. But that's not what would have attracted. But the fact that he's a poet, the fact that he's a very distinguished poet in the literary circles, and that is the pull factor that brings us, along with the keynote speaker who has highlighted the role played by one of the modern makers of modern India, Azad Saab. Professor Cheney, whom I know for a couple of years, and Registrar, Madam Shama from AMU Aligarh, and Director of the seminar, Geeta, the convener, other distinguished academics, delegates, and dear students. One of the things that I also found it interesting about this seminar is the reframing of the subaltern narratives. Subaltern narratives or subaltern studies collective is not new to us. We have been there since 1980s. We have been hearing all the 7 volumes, right from the first volume, which was edited by Ranajit Guha. We are students of literature, we all are aware of that. The other group, I think the first of them is the Ranajit Guha, and then you have Dipesh Chakravarti, you have Pandeji, others are there. But I was going through the concept note. It starts with Antonio Gramsci, probably his prison notebooks, and comes back straight away to the subaltern, collectives. And subaltern collective, the alluring, example of subaltern collective is that probably one of the few collectives with Western tools, Western critical tools, examined the Indian social reality. The reason why many of the scholars have that kind of an attraction. But one name that was missing is the Gayatri Spivak in the concept note. I don't know whether it's deliberate or it is. It ought to be. It ought not to be mentioned because Gayatri has been, she is a self-confessedly a Europeanite, all right. But then she has popularized this word probably more than Ranajit, who writes beautifully in the first volume, the first, chapter of Subaltern Studies. He writes beautifully about the insurrections that took place, which is one of the first struggles in the modern India, even prior to independence. So the reality that shaped these subaltern narratives, and it was indigenous struggles, I agree, and it was also the struggles of other groups like gendered groups, but also there are struggles like the early peasant movement, about which Ranajit Guru so eloquently writes. These struggles were what? They form part of the narratives. And these struggles for identity, these struggles for social space, these struggles for the bettering their lot, the lot of the community, they have shaped the narratives. Now the question is, having that, what is that which prompts us to reframe those narratives? What exactly is the context now? In the context, in the concept note, 3 terms are written. One is globalization, the other is migration, the third is digital transformation. In fact, I was going through one of the UN reports earlier, and in the report, they highlight, they flag 2 issues globally. One is the migration, the other is the digital transformation. The digital transformation they talk about after the kind of explosion that is taking place when in the digital space, this is also creating certain marginal groups. There is a divide and also the creation of the marginal groups who could be badly affected from having access to knowledge commons. So this is one aspect. The other one is migration. In fact, I will just give you, it's not the internal migration that we see in India in a large scale, particularly from areas like Northeast and other areas. Large scale migration is taking place. But before coming to that, I am talking about the internationalization of education, where here in higher education you will see that since 2000, the numbers have doubled up to 264%. And in these 264%, 2/3 of this population is crossing the borders, crossing the nationalities, crossing the countries. This is one indication of the kind of migration that could be happening at the base of societies, at the base of the communities. That we need to see, one. The second thing is that of this 264 million population, 53% are women. So you have, we can say that, yeah, the gender percentage is good in higher education, but it's not. Once you get into the real picture of the global south, we will see the inequalities. And I will give you the example. The GDP, gross enrollment ratio, GER, in Western Europe it is 80%, in Central Europe it is 87%, And in sub-Saharan countries, I will not talk about India, which is very low, below the average of 44. In sub-Saharan countries, it is only 9%. Only 9%. So we can see how much of the world population, the communities in the world, are less, in terms of access to higher education, in terms of knowledge, access to knowledge commons, are even acceptable human and social conditions. How much of that part of the world is below the norm? This is about the inequalities, or what you can say the disparities. Right now, I will not talk about migration because I have seen, I was there in Japan and there was a talk about migration. I think most of the Japanese industry and even some of the Western European industries, you have a lot of population from, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and this is just, it's not a small population to be ignored. It's a huge population. So the migration factor is a huge factor. So when you are talking about the globalization, digital transformation, and migration, these are definitely factors to reframe the subaltern narratives. And in one of the things, I will just highlight and then close my remarks. I told about Ranajit Guha, I told about, Spivak and Pran Pandey. One person I haven't told, that is Dipesh Chakravarti. Dipesh Chakravarti has, seen this trajectory. If you see, he's one of the most vocal proponents of the subaltern collectives. And he has written the first book, Post-Coloniality and the Artifice of History. That's from the Artifice of History. Now recently he published a book called Climate of History. So now the movement, particularly the vulnerable communities, the way they are exposed to the precarity, the condition that vulnerable communities are subjected to because of climate conditions and other social inequalities, this precarity is what he is addressing. So the subaltern, one of the important writers of the subaltern collective, Dipesh Chakravarti, has moved from post-coloniality and Europe provincialized to the climate of history. So these are some of the contexts we must look into while we see the subaltern narratives. And the other thing which right now, I think Baba, I think all of you know, I don't want to get into those cliches, but one important factor for those of us who are decolonizing nations, the culture of wrapping, and unwrapping, that which goes into our pedagogies, that also must come into this narrative reframing. I am sure these 2 days, I think I eagerly wait for the keynote of Professor Chini, who is well known in that area. And I'm sure these 2 days of deliberations will give us a good reframing possibilities. And hopefully Geeta and the director will bring out a published volume for all of us to have access to that. I once again thank the Honorable Vice Chancellor, the organizing team, Geeta, and others. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
We sincerely thank you, sir, for your erudite and inspiring remarks. I now request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Syed Ainul Hassan, to deliver the presidential remarks.
O you, thou name is the best beginning for every task. How am I expected to begin my discourses without remembering you? Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Nagaraju, Professor Vibha Sharma from Aligarh Muslim University, Professor Chenni, the keynote speaker, Professor Ishtiaq Ahmed, Professor Nagendra, Dr. Geeta, Professor Razaullah Khan, Professor Shagufta Shaheen, Professor Habib, host of colleagues, friends, girls and boys. Let me take cue from the learned speakers this morning. Which philosophy, which school, which narrative. I'm not here to explore all these things. But yes, Platonian philosophy often we refer to. And there we see there are many hidden secrets. There are many realities uncovered. One has to lift the curtain and find what exactly is there behind the curtain. So, this august gathering, this congregation might be able to discover many more things in the days to follow. But I am of the opinion, and as taking cue from Professor Sharma, that we often forget contributions of great people. We only remember their names. You know, I remember Begum Akhtar was not a literate person. But the kind of, impression he created is still, Begum Akhtar is not just a name. Rather, it's an institution. But what? She was reciting ghazals and Tumri Dadra of many poets, in fact, including Mirza Ghalib, Shakil Bedayuni, and others. So, unlike Umrao Jan, although her nom de plume was Ada, but what Umrao Jan Ada, we have no knowledge about her poetic caliber. So what is happening? दिल चीज क्या है आप मेरी जान लीजिए, बस एक बार मेरा कहा मान लीजिए. This was not Umrao Jan, this was Shahryar. See what is happening, See, निकाह फिल्म वो तेरा कोठे पे नंगे पाँव आना याद है. This is not, वो नंगे पाँव वो नहीं है जो उसमें एक्ट कर रही. उसके पीछे जो है वो हसरत है, हसरत का लिखा हुआ. हमने पहचाना नहीं कि कहाँ क्या है. उस्ताद बिस्मिल्लाह खां, I had long acquaintance with Bismillah Khan. He was from Banaras and he remained in Banaras. He left Banaras, Ganga and Ghat and other things. Illiterate person, absolutely illiterate person. But say Shehnai, Bismillah, nobody can match. Say the kind of great man, in fact. He was not a good speaker, very, very bad speaker, in fact. So he used to speak in Bhojpuri. So what I say, that we should try, this is the platform, you see, where we should try to identify the original work. Where is originality? We should explore. Folk literature, folk songs. In my childhood, I heard Ala Udal. It was prevalent in Varanasi. And then one Ala, one Udal, and the conversation going on for a very long time, in fact. Today we have Bazi, but that the Ala Udal culture. I introduced one subject, you see, at the school level in JNU, that was folkloric studies. But today we can introduce here also. It's very important, in fact. All the time we are talking about great ladies like Helen of Troy, Cleopatra. Why not ordinary ladies, household? We should pay little attention. But you know, there are certain repetitions also. Khayyam, if you want to discover Khayyam, the original time of Khayyam, it's very difficult because he was not a theist. He was not a religious person. He was a bindas person. Writing, like Kabir you mentioned. Kabir was from weavers' community. And similarly, Khayyam Nishapur, sitting in a corner, you see, and reciting rubais. But what Khayyam says, that look, today we see Madhubala, Madhushala, Madhukalas are repetitions, unnecessarily bala. Essence, where is the essence? We should really search for the essence of life, because life is there behind the curtain. How to lead this life, how to live in this world, these are the essentials. But I am sure, you see, Speaker Prasanna Nagaraju, Manu, Maulana Azad National Urdu University, in the name of Maulana Azad, great visionary, is catering to the highly marginalized sections of the society. Our students, 70% students coming from very, very poor background. And many of them first generation learners. See, I always say, my hats off. Their devotion, their urge to know many more things, to do something in this world, to discover something unique. That's the quality of this university. And our students are really, we must admire them. They are really doing very well. So I'm not here to deliver a long lecture, but something, the parameters are also to be known and to be given to our students, how to follow these patterns. I think let us take example of Shibli Nomani when he wrote Muazene Aniso Dabir. When Yusuf Hussain Khan wrote Hafiz and Iqbal, Hafiz on one hand, very, very poor man, sitting in a corner and writing ghazals, devotional also. Haqiqat and Majaz both. And then from a well-off family, Iqbal, there is a comparative study. And then comes, Mirza Ghalib and Matthew Arnold. See, Matthew Arnold also claims a Victorian era, when he claims that, what I am composing is unique and nobody would be able to compose such a poetry in future. And Mirza Ghalib also says, मेहरबान हो के बुला लो मुझे चाहे जिस वक्त मैं गया वक्त नहीं हूं कि फिर आ भी ना सकूं. But there are many, we should discover realities. Khayyam says, दरियाब दमी के बाद तरफ में गुजरत. Pick up a moment that gives you immense pleasure. And then we don't remember Khayyam. We remember Keats when he says that the thing of beauty is joy forever. This is what, you see, the irony is this, that we are not there to discover where is the original one. And there are many examples, where we have seen, Kautilya and Nizamul Mulk Tusi. We should see how they reacted to the administration. We should see what Sir Sayyid says, what Maulana Azad says. Do we have this courage to do a little comparative study of Sir Sayyid and Maulana Azad? And last, Professor mentioned, Lenin Khuda ke huzur mein. You mentioned, there is a poetry, Ghalib Khuda ke huzur mein. So we should also see, when we see Lenin Khuda ke huzur mein, then we should see a person from Lucknow, a poet composing, Ek roz maine khwab mein dekha ye majra, yani qiyamat aayi hai maidane hashr tha. اللہ ایک پردے کے پیچھے تھا جلوگر، وہ نور کا وہ پھوٹ ٹھہرتی نہ تھی نظر، نیزوں پہ شاعروں کے تھے دیواں پڑے ہوئے اور پہلو میں تھے ادب سے فرشتے کھڑے ہوئے. آواز آئی پہلے کہ غالب کو کھینچ لاؤ، ہتھکڑیاں اور بیڑیاں فوراً اسے پہناؤ. یہ سنتے ہی جو دوڑے فرشتے ادھر ادھر، غالب میاں پہ ایک جگہ پڑ گئی نظر. لمبی ابا و سر پہ وہ ٹوپی کی آب و تاب، شیشہ بغل میں ہاتھ میں تھا ساغر حساب. غالب کے پاس جا کے ملک نے کیا کلام، تم کو ملک نے کیا سوال، تم کو بلا رہا ہے خداوند ذوالجلال. غالب نشے میں بولے کہ بزم سخن ہے کیا، ہے غیر ترہی یا کوئی ترہی مشاعرہ. غالب یہ کر رہے تھے کیا کلام، فرشتوں نے کیا کلام کہ اللہ کے حضور میں اس زجا ٹیم ٹام، سیدھی طرح چلے چلو ہے قاعدے کی بات، ورنہ نشہ کروں گا ہرن مار دوں گا ہاتھ. غالب نے مار پیٹ کو سن کر کہا کہ ہاں تم تو پولیس کی طرح سے دیتے ہو دھمکیاں، انسان سے اکڑتے ہو، کتنے ہو بدخصال، تم کو نہیں ہے اشرف مخلوق کا خیال. وہ آج کر رہا ہے دل آزاری بشر، کل سجدہ کر چکا ہو جو آدم کی خاک پر. جائے بخیر اب نہیں ممکن رہی جو بات، غالب نے تھوڑی دیر ٹھہر کر کہی یہ بات، اچھا میں خود چلوں گا اب اللہ کے حضور، 2 گھونٹ پی لوں تاکہ دوبالا رہے سرور. گرتے ہوئے 2 گھونٹ پی لوں تاکہ دوبالا رہے سرور. گرتے ہوئے سرور کی حالت سنبھال لی، یہ کہہ کے اپنی جیب سے بوتل نکال لی. گرزے گراں لیے ہوئے ہر سو ملک چلے، غالب کو گھیر گھار کے اہل فلک چلے. پردے کے پاس جا کے ملک نے یہ عرض حال، ملک نے کیا آرام، غالب کو لے کے غالب کو لے کے آئے ہیں خدام با وفا. قہاریت نے بڑھ کے یہ پہلے کیا سوال، پیش خدا شراب پی یہ تاب یہ مجال. غالب نے تھوڑی دیر ٹھہر کر کہی یہ بات، مجھ خانما خراب پر اور اس قدر اعتاب. ارے شاگرد تھے جو غالب خانہ خراب کے، 2 ادھے رکھ گئے تھے کفن میں شراب کے. ایک ادھا تو چرا لیا ممکن نکیر نے، باقی جو بچ گئی تھی وہ پیلی حقیر نے. جو ذہن پر کھینچی تھی وہ تصویر دھل گئی، بیوی کے ڈانٹنے سے میری آنکھ کھل گئی. Now this is how we can really do little study. These are treasure troves of our literature. We should always remember. But when you say that I should also recite something of اس وقت جو نصاب کے اندر کی بات ہے، یہ بھی میری زبان کے تیور کی بات ہے. کیوں دیجئے اپنے بچوں کے ہاتھوں میں وہ کتاب جس کے خط حیات میں ٹھوکر کی بات ہے. پہلے ورق پہ اس کے گزارش ہے امن کی. Look at the kind of syllabus. پہلے ورق پہ اس کے گزارش ہے امن کی، اور دوسرے پہ تیر کی نشتر کی بات ہے. मजदूर के पसीने का चर्चा कहीं नहीं, ताऊस में जड़े हुए पत्थर की बात है। मजदूर के पसीने का चर्चा कहीं नहीं, ताऊस में जड़े हुए पत्थर की बात है। लिखा है हाशिए में, गरेबा है तार तार, और मतन कह रहा है रफूगर की बात है। अब वो किताब लाओ कि जिसमें हो कुछ हिजाब, अब वो किताब लाओ कि जिसमें हो कुछ हिजाब, और पेशे लफ्ज में कहीं चादर की बात है। इतना खुदा के नाम पे मत उलझो आए हसन, ये आपके लिए नहीं है, बंबई वालों के लिए। इतना खुदा के नाम पे मत उलझो आए हसन, ये बात तो मकान के बाहर की बात है। आई होप this exercise, this congregation will definitely culminate into something viable, benefiting the entire university, not only this university, but outside this university also there will be many takers, and you will have a very fruitful exercise during 2 days of brainstorming. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your visionary words and for your constant encouragement to literary and scholarly pursuits at Manu. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now proceed with the book release ceremony. For this segment, I request Professor Gulfisha Habib, Dean, School of Languages, Linguistics and Indology, Manu, and Professor Razaullah Khan, Director, CEDOE, Manu, to kindly join us on the dais for the book release. May I now request the dignitaries on the dais to kindly release the book of abstracts. Thank you. We now request the dignitaries to kindly release the book authored by Diksha Alur, student of Master's first semester. Her poetry collection titled A Song of Herself. Thank you. And finally, we now request the dignitaries to kindly release the book authored by Dr. Geeta. The title of her book is Beyond Boundaries, Voices of Shores. We express our sincere gratitude to our esteemed guests for releasing the publications and adding a memorable touch to this ceremony. At this point, I would like to thank Professor Gulfisha Habib and Professor Muhammad Razaullah Khan for joining us for the book's release. You may take your seats. I now invite Dr. Akram Khan, Faculty, Department of English, Manu, to propose the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. Honorable Vice Chancellor sir, our chief guest, guest of honor, Director CDOE, and Dean SLLI, and our former OSD ma'am. Distinguished dignitaries on the dais, faculty members, scholars, delegates, and dear students. On behalf of the Department of English and the organizing committee, I have the privilege to propose the vote of thanks for the inaugural session of 2 days national conference on reframing the subaltern narratives, comparative and interdisciplinary insights. I sincerely thank Professor Syed Ainul Hasan, Vice Chancellor, Maulana Azad National Urdu University, for presiding over this session and for his encouraging presidential remarks and continued support to academic activities at the university. I extend my thanks to our chief guest, Professor Nagaraju, Vice Chancellor, EFLU, English and Foreign Language, Hyderabad, for joining us and for his valuable remark. I am grateful to our guest of honor, Professor Vibha Sharma, who is also my teacher, Department of English, Aligarh Muslim University, for her gracious presence and thoughtful contribution. My sincere thanks to Professor Rajendra Chennai, Director, Mansa Center for Cultural Studies, Karnataka, for his insightful keynote remarks. I also thank Professor Ishtiaq Ahmad, Registrar Manu, for his support and kind words. I acknowledge the guidance of Professor Nagendra Kotacheru, Conference Director, and the dedicated efforts of Dr. Geeta, Organizing Secretary, in organizing this conference. I also acknowledge the collaboration and support of the Center for Distance and Online Education, CDOE, Manu. I thank the Digital Multimedia Center, Manu, for technical support, and the CPDMT auditorium team for providing the venue and logistical arrangement. I thank all the participants and delegates for their presence and academic engagement. With this, I conclude vote of thanks. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir. To conclude the inaugural session, may I request everyone to kindly stand for the national anthem.
जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंधु गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल गंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उत्कल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे, तब शुभ आशीष मांगे, गाहे तब जय गाथा। जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता।